All right, quick pause before today's episode. Let's talk about data accuracy because I've watched too many brands make huge mistakes based on broken attribution. If your Google Analytics revenue doesn't match your Shopify dashboard, which I know happens for most, or Meta claims credit for sales that actually came from email, you're making very expensive guesses about what's actually working. And from my years at Shopify working with many brands, I can tell you this, the problem is costing you real money every single day. Now, Little Data fixes this, and they're trusted by over 2,000 Shopify brands for conversion tracking that actually works. They create one reliable foundation across everything that you're already using. Think about Google Analytics for, revenue tracking, Meta, Google, TikTok, for better ad attribution. Think about Klaviyo, Attentive, like for your flows, and even Recharge, for example, if you're running a subscription business. And so the best part is that you set it up once and it just works. Like there's no maintenance, there's no technical headaches. It just scales as you grow your business. So if you're kind of tired of making decisions based on data that you don't completely trust, totally head over to littledata.io. They and their solution will help you fix your attribution foundation so that you have accurate data. So littledata.io. All right, let's go jump into today's episode.
You're listening to E-commerce Fastlane, the podcast show to help you build, manage, grow, and scale a successful and thriving company, powered by Shopify. Listen to real conversations with partners and subject matter experts as they share proven practical strategies, platforms, and the best Shopify apps to help you accelerate your business. The time is now for you to improve efficiencies, grow revenue, profit, and lifetime customer loyalty. Please welcome your host, startup founder and strategic advisor, Steve Hutt.
Well, everyone, welcome back to E-commerce Fastlane. I'm your host, Steve Hutt. Now, today we're going to dive into a topic that I would argue maybe isn't that glamorous, but I believe it's pretty critical right now if you're serious about, scaling your business. I'm on Shopify, and unfortunately, it's, I don't want to say it's a dirty word, but the whole sales tax compliance kind of comment. And I think, I know what you're thinking. This is probably not the kind of stuff that maybe lights up LinkedIn or gets kind of discussed at conferences, but I think that the moment that you start shipping or crossing state lines or hitting what these terms are called, like economic nexus, there's certain thresholds, or even international expansion, I think you start stepping into a world of compliance requirements that quickly, I would call, maybe become a bureaucratic nightmare for some people. Some people just put their head in the sand and just forget about it, and or pretend they don't know it exists. And they just kind of run their business as is, but that's not the right way to deal with taxation. And that's one of the reasons why I brought on Reuben Mattinson. He's the CEO of a company called RJM Tax Exemption. And what his team has done, they've helped, 4,000 to 5,000 e-commerce businesses really to help navigate this kind of complexity of U.S., tax compliance, and they work exclusively with online sellers. And it's interesting what they've done. They are, when you look at their history and you look at their reviews online, they are, the number one tax compliance pros out there in the Shopify ecosystem. And so it makes sense to have them on because they're talking from a place of authority and trust, which we really want when it comes to financial ideas. So, hi, Reuben. Welcome to E-commerce Fastlane.
Steve, absolute pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So, I agree about this whole, the fact that taxation is not a sexy topic, but, and I dug in a bit to your background just kind of before recording today, and it's quite interesting. I think I'd like to set the stage a bit about, you started off, I believe, in like physiotherapy and then high school science teacher, and then, now here you are, a top-rated kind of tax firm on TrustPilot for e-commerce. And so can you talk a bit about this? It seems like a lot of these things were totally random, but then all of a sudden now here you are. I believe you had your own e-commerce brand, I think, at one point, and now here you are with your company.
Yeah, I think the kind of similarities you see across those different areas that you've just mentioned are probably just working with people and helping people and trying to find ways to do that better. So I guess those are kind of transferable skills, but you're right, it's not your natural progression from physiotherapist to a tax consultancy firm. But yeah, how we kind of stumbled into it was really while I was still teaching, I set up my own e-commerce business, as you just mentioned. And
yeah,
if you can probably tell, I'm not from these parts. I'm from the UK.
Yep.
So I hit a lot of hurdles and a lot of walls getting started to sell in the US. I mean, there's walls at the best of times anyway if you're US based. And yeah, most of my clients we work with are US based. But initially, I kind of realized how difficult it was to do that as an international based business. And from where we started, we worked with a lot of international businesses, and that came out of my frustration really of speaking to a lot of law firms and accountancy firms and really paying a lot of money and seemingly getting very little back for what I paid and very little understanding in this very complex space of being an online seller where you're selling across every state and there's so many different rules and regulations. So it was kind of born out of that frustration and that kind of idea of there's really a niche here to serve people better and to probably charge a lot less, because I was, as I say, paying a lot of money to speak to, say, CPAs who were not very well versed in the area of e-commerce and particularly sales tax as well.
Yeah. It's interesting. We should probably maybe talk a little about the foundation, maybe a little bit about Nexus. I think that's one of the topics that I think is on people's minds right now. Like, I'm sure many people have heard the word thrown around, but I think honestly, like a lot of founders don't fully understand what it means for them specifically, or when they actually have to start caring about Nexus. So can you kind of break it down, like what Nexus kind of actually is, and then kind of more importantly, like at what point do you believe like a Shopify store's growth, should someone start getting serious about it?
Yeah, so I mean, Nexus comes in many different forms. I was just speaking to my CEO the other day. We were saying, is the plural of Nexus Nexi? Or is it Nexuses? But there's several different Nexus. And you mentioned, do you need to be aware of it? Well, what point do you need to be aware of it? I would say from day dot, from the beginning. Reason being, a lot of people think, well, the most popular and well-known Nexus is economic Nexus. So I'll just look at the volume of sales I make into a state. I'll look at the number of units I make into a state. And then when that triggers, then I'll have Nexus there and I'll need to worry. And just to answer your first question, Nexus is just really that threshold being crossed. And that term threshold makes it sound like, well, it's a number that I need to cross. Well, actually, you cross that threshold through many different ways as well. And I guess a more complicated one than economic Nexus is physical Nexus. And that comes through many different reasons. First, most common one is just where you're storing your products. Where are your warehouses based? Where are your fulfillment centers based? And then it can be to do with where your staff are based. That can get quite complicated when you're selling across the whole of the United States, which I'm sure we'll touch on later. So you've got that to look at. There's a little weird kind of part of that as well, where if you do trade shows, you can trigger physical Nexus as well if you do that in certain states. So you've got to be careful about that. And then the last two, which are probably even more commonly missed, are what called affiliate Nexus, which is if you've got people in the United States referring people to your website to purchase products and you're paying them commission, which is quite a common model you'll see, say from influencers, who is a great way to sell your products and drive traffic to your Shopify website. But you've got to be aware of where these people are based and what volume they're driving to your website, because you'll cross affiliate Nexus in quite a lot of states.
I see.
Threshold for that's quite low as well.
Yeah. That's interesting. So we have physical, I just wrote this down here. So, because I didn't know all of these. I always thought about like the economic Nexus was kind of like just like literally like a monetary amount, but I really do appreciate that difference with the physical Nexus and then the affiliate side too. That's quite interesting.
Yeah, exactly. And then even with economic Nexus, a lot of people think it's just a dollar value per calendar year, but a lot of states it's actually just number of units. So if you're selling quite low cost units, you could easily cross, say, 200 units in a calendar year, which some states is threshold. So you got to be careful of that. And then the final one to probably bring up is click-through Nexus, where if there's, again, a website which is driving traffic to your website and that entity that owns that website is based in a particular state, again, you need to be careful of that, of the volume that they're bringing to your website, because states will have thresholds that you can hit there as well.
Yeah. Another thing that I've learned a bit like over the years is that I think a lot of sellers get kind of tripped up a bit because a lot of them maybe start in the Amazon kind of FBA world, and and the platform obviously on Amazon collects and remits kind of like all the sales tax. So I've funny suspicion that a lot of founders say, okay, well, Amazon's taking care of it, and then they go and launch their Shopify store and they're under the same assumption, but it's clearly not. And so can you explain like why Amazon and Shopify are kind of like different on this, and like what does it mean for a seller who's been living in the Amazon bubble, but now they have their Shopify store?
Yeah, I mean, living in the Amazon bubble, they've been standing behind Jeff Bezos up until this point, as he's been taking responsibility for your taxes to be collected and remitted. So yeah, they lost a case a while back where they got seen as the people who are selling the products just as much as you, hence why the responsibility lands in their lap. And because they're selling just stupid volumes, of course, they're going to have to collect sales tax on every purchase. And it's great that they now do that for you. But I think a really big blind spot here is you've obviously highlighted people going to sell on Shopify. Well, yes, Shopify aren't a marketplace facilitator like Amazon, so they're not selling your product. You're having to drive the traffic there. You're having to drive that side of the business, so they have no responsibility. It's all on you. So that's a big thing which people can, yes, overlook. But I would say and if you can lean into this, listeners, this is very important, and I think a bit of a gem you probably want to remember, because it's going to be very costly if you don't realize this. If you're selling on Amazon FBA and you also want to sell on your Shopify website, you've got to realize that you've gone and stored a load of products across the whole of the United States in Amazon FBA warehouses. They have 36 states with Amazon warehouses in which all of them, if you store a product in that warehouse in that state gives you Nexus. So if you're selling on Amazon FBA and your products are, distributed across all the warehouses, you don't have control over that, by the way. They're just going to do that. Well, you've got Nexus, and up until this point, Amazon are remitting the tax for you, so you might not need to register to all of those states. But as soon as you switch over to Shopify, you're not starting from zero. You're starting from having Nexus in 36 states and needing to be registered in 36 states from day one. And a lot of people think, well, my Shopify business is a separate branch, or it's a separate part, or it's different, or I've not made any sales on that yet. But actually, that isn't how it works. And I think a lot of people put their fingers in their ears on that point and say, ignorance is bliss and all that kind of thing. But you've got to be really careful on that one, because if states are to then chase you in the future, they can say, well, you should have been collecting sales tax. And they have every right to do that if you store products on their soil. And they can then obviously take all of that profit out of your pocket. So yeah, remember that.
Yeah, one thing I've learned too when I was at Shopify was it's interesting from a strictly taxation perspective. Shopify is fairly good with their tax engine, depending on the origin of goods. I'm talking like maybe domestic U.S. orders, and then the shipping address of where it's going to. And you want to make sure that, the state and sometimes the county has a different kind of tax rules and tax amounts and stuff like that. And I think over the years, a lot of people were either connecting Avalara to their Shopify store because they felt that, and I think there was a direct kind of API connection. I think TaxJar, there's a few others out there that had some kind of connections, but I think it's Avalara is the only one that really, through an API, is connected directly to Shopify, and then you feel that it's going to be the most accurate from within cart upon checkout. Because I think there can be these decimal points of like, well, if we're shipping to Washington State, is every single city and county in the Washington State the exact same rate? It may not be, but sometimes the general tax engines that drive these things, that's just kind of what they have, which is actually incorrect.
Yeah, and actually, Shopify's tax engine is brilliant now, as you've mentioned. They may take a fee, as you probably noticed now, when to have the permission and the honor of collecting the tax for you. They take some money off you. But yeah, no, they're brilliant now at the thousands and thousands and thousands of different jurisdictions that are out there. So that's made life a lot easier and probably quite a lot cheaper than when you had to connect those softwares in, like Avalara and TaxJar.
Yeah. So have you seen any mistakes and stuff? I'm sure over the years you've seen some Shopify brands, when they start growing, and there's all these different types of nexuses, and it's not just the financial side of it. Like you said, there's the physical and then the affiliate side and things like that. I'm not throwing anybody under the bus, but anything anecdotally that you have found that when you're growing, you're at 1 to 5 million in revenue and things start scaling up. Have some people been shocked about what can happen to them because they're not thinking about their nexus?
Yeah, I mean, all the time. I've just highlighted obviously quite a big blind spot as far as FBA warehouses go, but even if you're not even storing across all the warehouses, there are many states that legally want you to be registered to them and do a gross filing and a deduction, even if you're not even selling on Shopify. So before you even get to that point, they're already saying, well, still register to the states and let us know that what Amazon is saying are matching. But then when people move to Shopify, as you say, yeah, the mistakes are numerous. I think a big one is people, again, assuming that the states can't track them, because you've got a very weird setup over in the States, you guys, because you've got federal tax, which everyone's petrified of, yet sales tax, kind of people treat it like a little teddy bear, I think, from experience a lot of the time, and the states and how they follow up, oh, it's not going to hurt us, it's just sales tax. And I find that really strange because in Europe, VAT, which is like the equivalent of sales tax, is treated the same as our kind of governmental country-based tax, and you would get into serious trouble. Now, the thing is, you can still get into a lot of trouble with sales tax, but I think people don't think they can. And I think what part of that is because they think, well, how are they going to track me? If I never register to these states, how are these states going to know? They're not bothered. They've not got the resources. Well, big mistake, because actually these states are in communication with a lot of different things that you don't realize. So these states are in communication firstly with marketplace facilitators so they can check the volume of sales that you're making. They're in communication with fulfillment centers. They're in communication with payment processors like Stripe, believe it or not, and payment processors that plug into Shopify. And they can be even in communication with delivery services. So when they're seeing a certain volume coming into their state and they're like, well, who's shipping this? They can actually trace that back to you. And the worst case scenarios we see are people obviously having some serious fines, some serious penalties, some serious holdings on their banks and their assets.
Wow, that's crazy. Now, what about clients that are non-US sellers? Because there's going to be like a lion's share of people listening right now that are trying to break into the American market. Because I believe it's probably a different animal, because now you're dealing with very, US specific kind of structures, and then that they've never really had to think about when they were an international, and now they're coming into America. Is there any like misconceptions about international sellers? If they want to start selling in the US?
Yeah. Firstly, shout out to all my international sellers out there. We love you guys. We get you. We are international as well. US experts, of course, but we love working with international businesses, and we work with many all over the globe. But yeah, I think I've just mentioned US guys don't treat sales tax very seriously a lot of the time from our experience. Well, I think even more so international people think they're protected even further because it's development in another country. So I think it's like whole nother level and layer of ignorance is bliss there. So I think that's what we see a lot. And I think even from an income tax filing point of view, which, by the way, we cover all taxes. I know we're talking about sales tax today because it's the most complex, but we cover state tax, franchise tax, income tax. We offer solutions to cover everything. But I think for an international, they would think, well, I don't need to pay income tax to the US because I'm not based there. And even if they get all of their ducks in a row and they're like, well, I don't have permanent establishment, I've got no reason to have to do it. They think, well, I don't need to file anything. Well, actually, you do need to file, even if you're not having to pay tax. You might be right about not paying it, but you need to file every year. And if you don't, the IRS have a pretty just blunt, will fine you $20,000 if you don't do it. And we catch you for in that position, and particularly as a business who's been functioning. So I'd say that's a big one for internationals, and one that's often missed.
Yeah, it's always the term like mind and management. You always hear that people say, well, my corporate address is here, and I'm going to pay the appropriate taxes that are due for the jurisdiction where the company is placed. But apparently that whole concept of mind and management is actually not correct any further.
Yeah, it's a strange one. And I think when we ever meet a business owner who you can see is very serious about their business and they care, you'll always get a different response. I think there is a big variety of different mindsets of work with and who we see. And there is a frightening number of people who, just kind of think it'll never get back to me. There won't be any issues and won't have any problems. But the big issue with that as well, you've got to think if you're building this amazing Shopify business, which so many of your listeners out there today will be, and it's your most precious asset in many ways, or it could definitely grow to be. You've got to think, well, one day what's going to make it that precious is a really great exit, when I sell this business.
Right.
How great that's going to be for us and as a company. And you've got to think, well, when you do that, you're going to get audited. Any serious buyer is going to look to, top to tail of your business. And when they start digging up all of these compliance issues, you're either not going to be able to sell your business, or it's going to cost you a lot of money to fix it. Because again, we've had to do that in our experience with a lot of different businesses when it comes to that point. So if you can do the hard work, and I say hard work, it's not even that hard at the start, but if you can just be on it at the beginning, you're going to save yourself so much hassle down the line.
It's funny, some brands in their early days, I think they really are kind of unfortunately focused on the vanity metrics of the business. And, a lot of times, it's just top line revenue and traffic on the website, and, maybe just on a high level, just conversion rate, maybe average order value. So there's some high level, these are truly vanity metrics, because you can have all the sales in the world, but then, your acquisition costs are so high that you're net zero or negative in a lot of cases. And then how you're dealing with your retention strategy to get the second and third sale and build these loyal customers. My thought is I think it's just part of like business acumen, just kind of learning better financial hygiene overall with your business, having a really good P&L statement, having a cash flow statement, doing it right. You brought it up about the whole exit thing. I think a lot of brands, maybe in their future, they're seeing that as a viable option for them. They don't mind selling their business in the future with a decent multiple, but they're going to start peeling the onion, right?
Yeah.
And the finances got to be in order. Yeah,
and I don't blame, I can't say I don't completely blame them because I'm a tax specialist, but I can see the appeal of just getting caught up in the excitement. You've started a business, it's doing really well, you've seen the profit coming in. Yeah, I totally get that. And a lot of e-commerce businesses as well, you're in a very exciting space where you can, unlike a lot of businesses, see almost overnight success. Like you can just hit the right product at the right time, or get that product on the right influencers, TikTok account, and,
boom,
1,000 people have landed on your website. And before you know it, you've crossed a load of Nexus thresholds that you never thought you would. And you've not paid attention. You just caught up in it. And I get it, because it's very exciting, but it's also very easy to have that sudden burst. And then suddenly all of these compliance point of view kind of comes into play. So I think it's just about being aware of that and not just getting swept up in the excitement too much, but do enjoy it, of course.
Yeah. Well, the other thing too, I'd like to talk about a bit about RJM, just like your business, and it's just the fact that, from what I understand, you don't necessarily hire CPAs for standard compliance work and things like that. You really try your best to keep the costs down. So can you talk a bit about that? Because I think people get really antsy when you start, adding on these professionals into the mix. Maybe in some cases they can justify their hourly rate or project rate to do what it is that they do, but you go about it in kind of a little bit of a different approach.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of mainly why we found our success, because as I mentioned at the start, I was very frustrated with having to speak to a lot of CPAs and pay a lot of money. And I realized these guys are actually, I guess, they're being overpaid, and they're actually underqualified in the area of sales tax a lot of time, because it's below their general pay grade in the sense of what they're having to do. CPAs are really excellent at giving brilliant legal advice and doing full audits for very large businesses.
Right.
But kind of seeing that gap and thinking, well, we don't have to be paying CPA rates. You can just hire really good tax professionals. That's where it came from. And that's how we function. So we have brilliant just sales tax professionals to deal with the sales tax side of it, who are really experts in their field, and who we can, as a result, offer a price match guarantee on our website, which we say we would match any price of any, established e-commerce tax business online. And then as far as income tax goes, we obviously have accountants in the US to do that. But again, you don't need CPAs. You don't need to be paying for all of that side of it and overpaying, when you actually just have experts in your field. Of course, if you need specific legal advice and you're worried about something and you need to kind of get all of that lined up, do that by all means. But yeah, we found great success in doing that. And I think that's why we've got really good customer ratings. I know you touched on as being rated number one and TrustPilot on a few areas. I think that's why we've been able to do that, because we can then pay our staff well and look after them, and I think just kind of create a positive environment where people are just doing a really good job and enjoying being here.
So what happens when, a business is listening now and they're like, okay, well, I mean, I feel like I kind of understand what my liabilities are, and I'm kind of going along my journey, but maybe it might make sense for, a brand to come to you and maybe assess their current kind of process. And so how do you help them figure out where they actually currently stand, kind of what you believe some of their next steps might be?
Yeah, so I mean, first port of call, if you were to pop to our website, you'll see an opportunity just to book a free consultation. So we do completely no obligation, no pressure whatsoever. Consultations just to have a chat. So I mean, first and foremost, just to give you guys a load of value, to have any questions answered that you have and any worries that you have. And we'll also just get a general idea of what your tax liabilities are there. And then on the phone, whether you're an international business or a US-based business, or a US-based business owned by a foreign entity, we'll give you an idea. Where do you stand with your state, franchise, your sales, your income tax, all of it. But then we'll also send you a sales tax Nexus survey, which is free again, which you'll fill out. And from that, we'll be able to just give you a really good idea of where you stand. And if you're scared of speaking to me, I can understand that. I have another option for you too. You can just look at the blog section of our website. We have loads of really great information there. And we have a search bar. You can just bash in any key terms and pull up some really useful information in our exciting niche, which we all love so much, the e-commerce space.
Yeah, I see that now. I'm looking under the business formation FAQs and sales tax filing and then tax compliance. So yeah, there's quite a bit of data here for those that are just kind of the DIY people, just want to kind of learn a little bit more. What about looking ahead now in 2026? Are there any major kind of tax changes or any kind of compliance things that you think are on the horizon that these sellers should maybe be prepared for right now?
Well, surprise, surprise, Steve, I'm sure it won't come as a surprise to you. Laws aren't getting any simpler, and actually they're not taxing people any less. I'll tell you that much.
That's true.
All that we are seeing, obviously we're in communication with all the states, and all we are ever seeing is new thresholds and boundaries being added, in a sense of more excuses and reasons to tax you, like more services now flagging up as having Nexus, because a lot of it, and it initially was just physical products, but even if you sell services now in a lot of states, they're wanting you to track Nexus. So yeah, I think what I'm expecting, if I'm a weather forecast tax guy, it's not looking bright on the horizon, Steve, as far as what the states are doing to us. But at least you've got some people fighting your case on our side and making it as simple and as cheap for you guys as possible.
Yeah, I noticed too, there was one, I kind of ran it through Perplexity this morning because I was curious about this. And one of the things that they noted was the kind of elimination of these transaction thresholds, because they're saying Illinois right now is going to remove their 200 transaction threshold for economic nexus starting January the 1st. So that's so interesting. And I'm sure there's other states that are going to go along with that, because I think it was typically $100,000 a year or something per state or something. And so that's one of the things that are kind of down the pipeline right now.
Yeah. And I mean, one other that just comes to mind actually, Steve, is California and their franchise tax, which initially, if you were an FBA seller and you were storing products in an FBA warehouse, they generally left you alone and they're like, oh, you don't need to pay any franchise tax. But now if you store a single product in a warehouse, you don't just have to register for the sales tax, you have the privilege of paying their franchise tax of $800 a year minimum just to store a single product on their holy ground, which they have. So yeah, they're becoming quite aggressive with that. So yeah, I mean, it is what it is. But I think for the most part, I think states have a pretty good sense of what it's like running an e-commerce business, and they're not horrendous. But there are still a couple of states which are just like that moody person living down the road who you tried to avoid, that they just seem to be coming for you and making your life harder. But we'll look after you.
All right, good stuff. So I want to make sure I get the website correct for everybody, just in case people are listening right now. So rjmtaxexemption.com. So you can go there. It'll be in the show notes for today's episode. I see the book now, calendar, boom, a free 30-minute. I think doing that audit and just kind of understanding where you are from a compliance perspective of all these different physical and economic potential affiliate or even click-through Nexus. I think these are all really important criteria, and just find out, what's your process right now with your P&L and your cash flow, and just overall, just let's understand the financial health of your business right now, and then seeing if maybe your team might be helpful for them. I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's just all about education. It depends on where you are, kind of in your entrepreneurial journey and your business size, but it's worth having other pros that are actually deep in the trenches for Shopify brands, just to kind of have a look. That's why I'm having you on today, because I really feel that it's as unsexy as it is, it's incredibly important for the longevity of the business. And so this has really been quite an eye-opening episode. I want to thank you for coming on today and sharing today.
An absolute pleasure to be here, Steve. And I really look forward to hopefully having a really helpful chat with some of your listeners.
Absolutely. All right. Well, have yourself a great afternoon, and thanks again for recording.
Thanks, Steve.
All right. Take care. Well, that's it for today's episode. I'd like to thank you personally for being a loyal listener of E-commerce Fastlane. It's my hope that this podcast is offering you a ton of value through growth strategies, tactics, and exclusive insider tips on the best Shopify apps and marketing platforms, all with my personal goal to help you build, manage, grow, and scale a successful and thriving company powered by Shopify. Thanks for investing some time today and listening to the show. I'm so proud and excited that you have a growth mindset and are a constant learner. I truly appreciate you and your entrepreneurial journey. Enjoy the rest of the week and keep thriving with Shopify.